or something and just made everyone real uncomfortable. Okay, anyway, let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Ask Broman. This is Ask Broman episode 69. Hooray, meme numbers. It is Saturday, May 26th. It's around noon. We're doing this live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Professor Broman. And today we are being joined by YouTube superstar, LOL. Just kidding. Actually, Byf's great on YouTube. He's got like multiple million view videos. He is the lore master of the Destiny community. And he's an all-around incredible guy. I've known Byf for I've got coming up on 4 years now. He is incredible. So he's joining us today. Everyone say hello to Byf.
Ben, I gotta say this, by the way, dude. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a little side note, by the way, for anyone who's listening. This is totally not a frickin' plug that Ben is asking me to make.
I'm not asking him to do
say
anything.
this right now. I started listening to the Ask Broman podcast about a week ago, and as a creator who is relatively sort of sizable at like 500,000 subs on YouTube, this is incredibly valuable. I have learnt a lot listening to the small like sections that Ben has put out all the way over on Spotify, but also the full episodes, just the entire thing. It's really worth giving it a listen. There is a lot of knowledge that you can gain. So, Ben, thank you for having me on here. It is genuinely such a pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you for the super nice words. It's really cool to hear feedback that for somebody who's higher level, like, you know, you've been doing it for a while, that there's still value in the stuff we're doing here. I like to think that there is, but I don't ever presume until someone's like, yes, this is helpful. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of talk about your journey as a content creator, because I think that everyone's journey has value for people, especially since, unlike a lot of folks that I've had on, you started and are primarily on YouTube. So like, how did you start YouTube? What got you interested? And like, what was your process? Like, let's like cover your beginning through the end of your first year.
So, it really depends where you want to start in terms of my YouTube journey. Because technically, I think I've been doing this for about 7 years, but there's two kind of starts to everyone's channel, right? There is your sort of initial beginning moment where it's like, hey, I created the channel, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm finding my feet. And then there's the, oh my gosh, I'm monetized. This is where it really starts.
I want to know about you getting your feet wet and like what your first videos were like and like what motivated you to start making them.
Okay, so that's a ton of fun. This was all the way back in 2010, 2011 or so. There was a wonderful moment which kind of changed my life, which was a very typical story of a somewhat stubborn teen thinking to himself, I'm going to prove some people wrong. And
awesome.
My folks, more specifically my dad, saying, why can't you do something a bit more productive than playing video games? And my snap response to that in my head was, challenge accepted. I'm going to do both. I'm going to do something productive by playing video games.
Fantastic.
And yeah, YouTube was the very clear answer to this. And, you know, there was a little bit of resistance when it came to this at first, but more so because of the fact that I was playing video games all day. And I will say that I have been relatively lucky in my journey when it comes to just the support that I got from my folks, because whilst at the very beginning, as most parents of, say, 10 years ago did, they really didn't get it.
Yeah.
They didn't understand. It was a whole new space for them. It's the internet. So, I mean, you know, all the standard kind of limitations that everyone expects were in place, you know. Oh my God, there's strangers out there. How do you know the person isn't catfishing you? All that other nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a very similar experiences as well. Not to interrupt too much, but like, I feel like this is a conversation that I hear over and over again.
Right.
That, and I want everyone to understand that like, it is your parents' job to keep you safe. Like a lot of parents, like that's their first thing is keep you safe. And like going into content creation, even though it's really high reward, is super high risk. So every parent is going to gut check you before you like walk through the door. It's kind of almost, it seems like it's like paying your dues for people our age. Cause my dad, you know, I dropped out of, I didn't drop out. Like I finished my college degree and then I dropped out of my master's program for other reasons. But, you know, when I told my dad, oh, hey, this is going well, and I think I'm going to get into full-time content creation, you know, even though I was 25 when I had the conversation, he was still like, I think that's a horrible idea. I think you're making a mistake, and I think you're throwing away all your hard work.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally got to echo what you say. It is entirely their job. Like, it's also, I think, not hard to sort of take a walk in their shoes when it comes to stuff like that.
Of course.
You know, like, I am nowhere near close to having children. But when I do, I can imagine myself having a maybe slightly more enlightened, but still very scared reaction if, you know, well, my son or daughter comes up to me and says, by the way, I started doing a thing where I'm putting myself out there on the internet.
Yes.
You know, totally scary. But yeah, I started doing YouTube videos, and I don't think I can really sort of do justice to what I do now if I describe what I was starting with, but it is still very important because it made some of the fundamental choices for me, right?
Yeah.
So I started back in Halo Reach. For those of you who don't remember, and who might be even younger than I am, you know, those of you who are still sort of in high school, back in the day, there were 2 big games instead of just Fortnite. There was Halo and there was Call of Duty. And both of them were first-person shooters, both of them were massive. And it was kind of the war of the time was, did you like Halo? Did you like COD? And I was very much in the Halo camp. Of course, Bungie moved on after everything was said and done. Studio passes the license over to 343. And I think the big moment for me was actually in 2013. Because whilst I was studying at the age of 18 or so, actually 17 considering things, for like exams that you always do in England at that age, I suddenly had this moment that changed my life. It was when I was bored from revision, and I took a break, and I started looking up stuff on YouTube as I did. My channel was very much dead. I'd had it going for about 2 years, gained about... small in the grand scheme of things, but it's still 3,000 people. So I'd done stuff, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that changed my life was the first ever trailer for Destiny released. It was the one that came out in 2013. It was the opening views of everything. And that gave me, I think, one of the biggest revelations of my life, which is that I was not a Halo fan, I was a Bungie fan. And so that was the moment where I said, okay, I've rediscovered why I started doing this. I've rediscovered why I love it, because I fell in love with the idea of the stories that were being told in Bungie's worlds. Halo was very much this story about wars between humanity and an alien race, but it was set to a backdrop of something much more mysterious with the Flood and the Forerunners and the Halo rings. And Destiny just grabbed me with that same sense of a universe that has a compelling idea at its center. And so from that moment forward, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And as a more sort of overarching thing for my channel, I wanted to be a part of that universe. And it didn't really become clear to me until a few years later, but that was also the moment when I realized that the entire goal of what I wanted to do with content creation was to tell stories, right? And so that has, from that moment onwards, been kind of the center of my channel. And before it was just kind of like, hey, you know, I'm cruising along doing the standard news stuff, but that really came into, you know, prominence for me, and it really became my mission by the time that Taken King launched and I started doing actual videos on the lore and story of Destiny. And that's where I'm at right now. And so I fully transitioned out of news by the time Destiny 2 came around, and it blew my channel up. I gained like 100,000 subscribers in the space of a month at the launch of Destiny 2. And yeah, that kind of solidified for me what I had been trying to sort of reach for over these last 7 or so years, which was, why am I doing this, right?
Yeah.
It's a really weird thing, because I mean, I think that I can say this for most content creators. Either you start with a clear, definitive vision of what you want to do with your presence online, or alternatively, you find that as you go, and you discover more about yourself. And for me, it was very much the latter. And now that I've found it, it gives me a lot more direction as to what I want to do. So yeah, that's kind of how it all kind of started.
I really like that you realized that like your goal was storytelling. That storytelling is actually a really big part of content creation that I think it goes unnoticed a lot, because even like you bring up the idea of like making news videos, right? But even for people who just do that, like there's a story for the people who are the best at it. There's a story about their evolving opinions. There's a story about, you know, what they think about everything. And once you have like a high volume of like critical videos, like even if you're just doing like reviews, there's a narrative around you as a person. Like you earn, you know, your stripes. Absolutely. And I think and I saw you tweeting about this, and I wanted to talk about it on a podcast with someone that it really mattered with. But recently, a lot of creators got started because of a guy named Total Biscuit, who very recently passed. He passed yesterday, 2 days ago.
2 days ago. Yeah.
2 days ago, and I saw Byf tweeting about that. Even myself, like, I tended to disagree with almost every review the guy wrote, but the strength of his character and the just the constant rawness of the way that he would review things created a narrative around his reviewing of content. I'm really curious about this point in particular. Do you feel like it is how important do you view authenticity in creating content?
I think it is easily the most important thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The moments that I sit there and regret the most are moments where I feel like either in private or on a video or in public, if I feel like I have misled something or I have not represented something correctly or I have not been myself, right? Because that is something which ultimately is going to bite me in the ass more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Authenticity is the most important thing you can do as a content creator, as a practice. I cannot sum that up. Oh God, it boggles my mind to think of the crazy things that have happened over my time in YouTube, but it should go without saying that people have lived and died in my time professionally. So that's not even like half my time doing YouTube full stop. Within 4 years,
Yeah.
we've seen channels live and die based on their authenticity and how much they actually act on their principles, or whether they have principles that people can agree with, right? It's totally important. And aside from anything else, I think the thing that really drives me when it comes to that is the fact that I always see the payoffs of authenticity as well as the negatives, right?
Yeah.
So if you trade on a simple set of values, like the guys at WTF Game Nation, who I raid with on a very regular basis, those guys are wonderful, but a big part of that is because they are authentic and they constantly keep a core set of values at their heart. And they completely and utterly stick to those values regardless of what happens. And as a result, they have a community that trusts them. They have a group of people around them that is always going to support them. And whenever there is an endeavor, or if ever something goes wrong, your community forgives you, right?
Yeah.
And it's so important. I could wish on about this forever. So if I do, just feel free to cut me off.
No, authenticity is a subject that it comes up a lot, but it comes up as this amorphous thing, right? Like, oh, you just have to be authentic. And then like everyone's like, well, what does that mean? Like, authentic, like my grandma's cooking. Like, I don't fucking get it. But I think you really pin that down in a way that I haven't been able to yet personally. And that's, you operate on a core set of principles and you really don't waver from them. Like, if you're the guy that makes YouTube videos and everyone knows that you're the no bullshit guy, and then suddenly you review a game that's kind of bullshit and you're like, no, this thing's great. And you're only doing it because, like, God forbid, they're paying you or something like that, and that gets found out, like, you're done. But having the core set of driving principles inform all of your content is huge. It took me a long time to discover how to implement, my core principles into the content that I was making. Because for a long time when I was starting, like, I was just doing speed runs, and that was really easy for me because I was doing speed runs so that I could participate in AGDQ and SGDQ every year, right? So that was a really obvious, like, it's obvious, like, oh, this guy cares about charity. Like, every time I'm in the stream, he's talking about, AGDQ and SGDQ and like how he can't wait for the next speedrunning marathon, etc. To streaming Destiny full time when it came out, and then I feel like I sort of lost my ability to communicate those principles a year into streaming, Destiny kind of full time. And I took I had a really difficult journey. I went to the Bungie studios and I had a blast there. And the feedback coming out of that event really, I guess, wrecked me personally. People didn't like me. They thought I was too loud. They thought all this other stuff. And that was the first time in my life I ever like felt in my adult life, I felt like ashamed of who I was because I gave a shit about what other people thought. And so because of that, the 6 months following this moment in my life, I tried to edit myself away from just being who I was to try and fit into this mold that I thought other people wanted. And that is easily like the worst 6 months of content I've ever made in my entire life. You have to stay true to your core principles, and sometimes it's really difficult, especially in transition, to sort of understand how to do that. But I would recommend to anyone out there who's maybe going through a transition or trying to find their voice again, because there are moments, and this is actually a really great time to bring up this. There are moments in your career, and the biggest one is when you go from doing it as a hobby to doing it full time. And that transition is often difficult. And I will echo what Byf said. I've seen a lot of people lose their way almost immediately when money comes into the equation. So to circle back, what was it like going from doing things as a hobby, overcoming that hurdle with your family, with your parents, and, going, holy shit, like I can monetize this now and I can pay some bills?
Oh my god. A whole flurry of emotions. I think liberating at first, and then a little bit relaxing, and then immediately after that very stressful. But I mean, it speaks more to the time at which this happened. So I started to monetize my content on YouTube when I joined my first multi-channel network at Curse Union for Gamers, which, by the way, piece of advice, I'm not sure if it has changed, but last I checked, if there is anybody who is looking to enter YouTube's partner program and currently is still applicable, Curse has always had a very reasonable starting contract for an MCN, so there is a little advice for you guys. Go ahead and check them out.
Love it.
Anyway, to return to the whole point of emotions, and to what it was like, I still remember to this day the conversation that I had over Skype, back in the day, with my parents, right? And it was this moment where my dad, who had always pushed me to sort of do something productive, and my mum were both there. And I sort of sat there to them and I said, I am now going to be making money off of the videos that I put on YouTube. And I remember my mum sort of immediately perking up and almost being a little bit alarmed, but in a good way, sort of like, whoa, he did it. He did the thing he said he might do one day, as like, the defiant, stubborn teenager self he always was. And in the meantime, I then immediately saw the reaction on my dad's face, which was cool, calm, collected, and slight smile on his face. And I will never forget or be any less thankful for that today or any day in the future than I was in that moment. Because, oh my gosh, it means the world to have someone support you on that front, right?
Yeah.
But following up after that, immediately, the next big thing was Destiny 1's launch was around the corner. And so, off of the month when I launched, I got a paycheck, which was equivalent to sort of not anywhere close to a complete student loan, but I was basically getting my grant twice because of the paycheck that month. And all of a sudden, that's the point at which I not only saw like, oh my god, this has the potential to be the future, but also there was a little bit of liberation there. Because for the previous year, I had been doing the typical student thing of budgeting to every single penny and making sure that my life was completely controlled. And I've been making sure very firmly that I wasn't overspending anything. I made sure I never went into the red. My account never got an overdraft or anything like that, but it was tight. And then all of a sudden I had the freedom to buy things. But instead of doing that on a consistent basis, the first thing that I ended up doing was saving all that money. I saved the first $10,000 I made and invested all of it into a new streaming and, YouTube setup. And I've kept a lot of the components of that to this day.
Wow.
I do need to keep replacing it because, I mean, like, the PC that I've got right now...
Yeah, you update, things degrade...
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, the thing is getting old, and it does need a few parts replaced here and there. It blew up just before Destiny 2 came along. The power supply just shorted out, and there was a nasty moment where I genuinely thought that I was gonna, lose my channel.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, there's been moments, but, the whole point of me saying that is that the entirety of my first year was building towards an investment in myself. So that was what was really liberating, because it was just another moment where I transitioned from a kid making videos on his laptop with iMovie to somebody who all of a sudden had a professional quality microphone, had the ability to work across multiple monitors for the first time in his life, which that one's huge, had Adobe Premiere instead of iMovie, and, you know, could make better videos in terms of production quality and in terms of the actual time it took. And so that was huge, right?
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's honestly one of the biggest game changers, and I cannot recommend strongly enough that if you are a creator and you've just become partnered, save for your first year, right? Like, unless you obviously need to go ahead and pay bills and like put food on your table, in which case obviously like that is your priority. But if you can, save money, get a decent setup with any money you save, and when you've said and done all of that, you will find that it pays dividends. That first year of investment has paid itself off something like 10 or 20 times over the last 4 years.
I'm sure. That's actually
it's huge.
Such a big point. The point of reinvestment, you know, this is something that I did a lot, I guess, when I was getting started. You know, you were talking about the things you spent money on. Like, for me getting started, one of the ways that I invested was like, I didn't upgrade anything about my life until I had been streaming full time for like almost a year and a half. Like, I lived in the same apartment that, you know, I had like $900 in bills total to stay alive and eat food and stuff. And I mean, I even I even like refused to upgrade my streaming setup. Like, I was like, it fucking works, so whatever.
Right.
You know, it wasn't until I moved to St. Louis with you know, with Witwix and T-Rex that I kind of upgraded my lifestyle a little bit. I think that reinvesting, like putting the money directly back into your like already existing ecosystem, is kind of hard, because I think everybody wants like the payout, like, oh my god, like I just got X and like now it's time for me to buy, you know, now I'm going to buy like a super nice keyboard, or I'm going to buy a car, or I'm going to start taking this money and using it to pay other bills. But I think that the longer you can sort of wait to take money out of your I'll call it like an engine, like you're using an engine to create content and you're upgrading the parts of that engine, the longer you can wait to take the parts out of that, you know, to feed other sections of your life, the better you're going to do in the long term. You know, like Byf said, he invested $10,000 in his setup before he, you know, took any pay for himself. And I think that that's so huge to do, you know, and it's something that I've started doing on a I guess a different approach very recently, and it's paid a lot of dividends. Like, I've been looking for an editor for like a year. I finally found one and hired one, and within 2 months, you know, my YouTube channel went from making no money at all to making enough money to pay my editor's salary, which is a big deal. And that's reduced friction for my content creation. I have people coming back being like, holy shit, bro, man, like, I'm so happy you're doing YouTube again. And like, there's all these things. Like, reinvestment can happen at the beginning of your journey, but I think that you need to continuously reinvest and find ways to reinvest in your content, whether that's expanding your reach, making sure you're automating parts of your process and getting it out to other people, or if you're big enough, paying someone. If you're making enough, paying someone to help increase your distribution. Because for me, it's about, you know, putting as many bets on the table as I can every day, and hiring someone to make sure that I have YouTube content every single day is a big part of that. So yeah.
Go ahead. My apologies.
So I was going to ask you. So after you got out of that reinvesting phase, and you got out of sort of growing on your YouTube channel, I actually have a couple questions about growth on YouTube. One, like, everyone's going to ask this, and I asked Nepenthes when he was on, what do you think is the best strategy for growth on YouTube currently?
Ooh, okay, so here's a little bit of a tip about the landscape of YouTube at current. Everything in YouTube is most certainly very different from Twitch, and the primary reason for that is, as you've said a few times on this podcast previously, Twitch is entirely based on a system of directories, and discovery of top channels is much easier. However, on YouTube, it's a lot more random because it's algorithmic, right? It is entirely based on Is your video getting watched on a regular basis by a lot of people? How long are people watching that for? And are you hitting topics that have a significant amount of metadata behind them? And this is another thing that very briefly I'd explain. Metadata is a term that is bounded about a lot, but basically it's everything that makes your video viewable in terms of what the topics are about, right? So if I put a video up and it's about a game, the very first thing in the title and the description of that video is probably going to be the name of that game. If I make another Warframe lore video, the first 2 words in the title and in the tags and description is always going to be Warframe lore, because that is entirely what I want people to see when they search for Warframe War, is my video, right? So it is very much about understanding that you've got to go ahead and put that out there with all of your content. You've got to target the audience. Like, sometimes, you know, you'll put a Mimi video out there and being like, that wasn't what I expected, would literally be the name of the title. Or with T, for example, when he recorded King's Fall, when he first saw the final boss, I think the title of that video is literally Nope, 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 right?
Yeah.
There are exceptions as a result, right? Like, you don't always need metadata, but that's probably my best piece of advice for anybody who's starting out. At current, in the environment that has evolved, YouTube is trying to compete with streaming services. And when I say that, people are going to think that I mean something like Twitch or Mixer. But when I say streaming services, know that I mean things like Netflix and Hulu, right?
Yeah.
Because those are the real competitors to YouTube in terms of the kind of content that it's creating.
I want you to say that again, because it's really fucking important that people get that perspective.
YouTube is trying to compete with streaming services, not Mixer and Twitch. Instead, they're trying to compete with Hulu and Netflix, right?
Yes.
You can tell this because the way they have changed their algorithm in the last several years has been skewed away from view count, right? So viewers, you know, if a video got more views and it had like all of a sudden a surge, it was more likely to get seen over and over again. It is now changed according to the length of content. And they have incentivized this in a whole bunch of ways. So for example, if your video is between 10 and 15 minutes, you are much more likely to have it hit. If it is a big seasonal video where, you know, you'll throw something out there occasionally and it is huge, there is also a decent chance that it will succeed. And so YouTube is really pushing this with their algorithm. On top of that, as a total side note, from a YouTuber's perspective, it makes a lot more sense financially to make videos that are 10 minutes or longer. And there is a very simple reason for that, which is that you can run mid-roll ads on it. And, you know, everybody hates the whole thing of like advertising generally on YouTube, but I will simply say this: you get the content for free. And, you know, for a YouTuber, it's a huge freaking deal to be able to put that extra ad on there, because that's, I mean, I cannot go into financial specifics at all because contracts are contracts, but it makes a huge difference. It is the difference between someone doing YouTube part-time and someone doing it full-time and living relatively comfortably, making a certain number of views, right? And not even a large number of views, right? Like, I cannot stress this enough. If you have a content creator that makes videos that are over 10 minutes, this is another thing, turn off ad block and appreciate the fact that you get that content for free. It makes our lives a million times easier. YouTube is already doing things that are kind of rough, but yeah, that is the core of the algorithm, right? That is the core of how you become discovered on YouTube. And I think that also something that is a bit of a shift, especially when you see channels like H3 rising to prominence in the last few years, content that is analytical makes a larger splash than it did. Right, so YouTube 5 years ago was a whole load of 2-minute clickbait videos. Yeah, right. You know, that just really wasn't a professional space. But now we have seen the dawn of the professional content creator in full, and it's certainly not a matured industry yet. But content creators such as H3 have proven quite substantially, I think, that if you put out content that is well thought out, even if it's a viewpoint that some people will disagree with, people are going to watch it. Because at the end of the day, that's what I think people are hungry for. Yeah, sure, you're always going to have like that audience of like 13 to 18-year-olds who are just looking for the next big Fortnite clips video, right? But, you know, you've also got a massive audience on YouTube that is really looking for analytical content. And that, at least for me, is what I've chased. That's true. It also fits really well into that like 10 to 15-minute video time. Because at the end of the day, not only is that how much time you often need to talk about a good topic analytically, but also that's roughly how much time people have on like a lunch break or something. Exactly. That's how much time people have to like sit down and watch a video. And if it's yours, even better, because you have an audience member that clearly cares.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that that's something that you see a lot of clash on social media about, like old and new YouTube sort of run into each other sometimes. So you'll have people like H3H3, and then you'll have people, Total Biscuit would do a lot of analytical stuff. And then, you even have people like Keemstar who makes news-based content, and, I see his process gets a lot of flack, but in reality, like, he's delivering the exact same kind of information about the YouTube entertaining space that you would get if you were to turn on any entertainment news channel on the television. Like, it is amazing to me to see these already existing sort of content delivery mediums pop up on social. Like, even, and then there's bigger media companies like Vice who've taken true hard news. Like, we're going to go to North Korea and we're going to talk about the living conditions in North Korea. And here you go. And it's on HBO, but it was on YouTube first.
Right.
And that's
where they hit big. Right.
And that's incredible. So, that's a really interesting thing, I guess, that I've been observing, but I didn't recognize the uniqueness of that until you brought it up. So what kind of advice would you have to someone who wants to make longer form content or focused content? Like, you make videos, and if anyone's here and hasn't heard of you or has heard of you once, it's likely because you made a 1.5 hour long Destiny 1 lore video. So I think breaking down your process for that would probably reveal a lot for people as to how to make long form content. So let's use that video as a piece of framework, and kind of talk about your process.
I want to say that, so first of all, I'm absolutely going to go ahead and talk about that, but I do not think that the 90-minute video is actually a good example, right?
Okay,
because
well, you use whatever framework makes the most sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I only say that because the 90-minute video was basically me using every skill that I'd learned over 70 years? No, 7 years. I'm not a freaking
You're not 100 years old.
No, so I literally took almost every skill I'd learned in 7 years and put it into one video with that.
Gotcha.
But if you're looking for long form content on the regular, I think some tips that I would have a few practical things and then a few philosophical things. Starting with practical, have a template in your editing software, right? So I use Adobe Premiere Pro, and you can load up a project. I have had the same project for the past 200 videos that I've used. Do not make a separate project for every single video. It's way easier to manage, but aside from anything else, that also cuts down on your production time because it keeps the template the same. Nowadays, I upload all my videos in 4K, and I'm either using PC footage or I'm upscaling stuff if it's from console from time to time, because, Destiny 1 is still something I pull footage from. So that's a thing. And that just basically means your entire production process is smoothed out. And if you can, keep an idea of how powerful your PC is as well, and plan out your day and your content creation according to when you think your video is going to be done, right? So if I finish my final edit on a video and I hit render and it's 4 p.m., I know that it's going to take me roughly 3 hours to put the video through the entire process of render and then export from software into a file that I can upload to YouTube, and then also do all the other background stuff, right? That entire process will take me 3 hours roughly. So I know when I can get my videos out on time that day and when I can make it so that they hit hard. Another thing I would say, just as a general point, by the way, find when the peak time for your audience is and upload then. And speaking on my personal account, because I have a lot of US viewers, that tends to be 8:30 p.m. UK time. Because in the West Coast, that's when people are on their lunch break, and on the East Coast, people are just getting home from work, right? So think about when you're uploading and be smart about that. General advice, but it matters even more for long-form content, because you may be going a few days between videos. On that note, philosophical stuff. Do not be afraid to establish a rapport with your viewers and be real with them. I am often real on Twitter with the fact that videos get delayed. I'm often real with my viewers on Twitter about the fact that I am in the process of making certain videos and that I want feedback. I am often going to do that because it's not just something that helps them understand what the production schedule is like. It is something that feeds back into our earlier conversation about authenticity. right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, doing little things like that means that my viewers know that the videos are going to take time and they know they're going to be higher quality. And that pays dividends because it means you can afford to take a few days between videos. And this is something that really horrifies YouTubers, right? Like, the entire premise of YouTube is the more that you upload, or at least the more that you have eyes on your channel, which is the kind of finessed way of saying it, I guess, the more that your channel gets discovered, right?
Yeah.
And the reality of it is absolutely that. Like, you should always look to upload whenever you can. It's just the same as streaming. But if you are doing long form content, you can afford to take that break, because if you have to take longer to make a video, your viewers will appreciate that. The number of times that I've said, sorry guys, I can't get this video out tonight, it will not be ready. And the number of times that in response, someone has said, that is okay, take your time, we appreciate the attention to detail, I cannot count it. So that is just something to really ring forth. Do not be afraid to take the extra day, right? And to balance that, by the way, also don't look for your videos to be perfect every time. Still look for your videos to, right? Because you can't make a perfect video. There is no such thing, right? But you've also got to accept that the pursuit of the perfection is more important than I bungled that.
Than the perfection itself. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, and that's a favorite phrase of mine from CNET, actually.
That's
totally hit that on the head.
You know, I like to point that out so much, is that eventually perfection can become an excuse. Like, oh, I'm not going to put this out until it's perfect. And in reality, like, you're just delaying something that's already good enough. Like, you're definitely going to have content that is the best shit in the world, and you're going to have content that's going to suck ass compared to your standards. But learning when to let a project go, like, out into the fucking world and into the, you know, the ecosystem, is so important. I think that, you know, at least for me, like, I've never really realized that you do all that communication stuff, but you really do. Like, you over communicate about your process when you're creating longer videos. You know, you'll say things, and this is true. You can go check Byf's Twitter. Like, he will literally say stuff like, I'm working very hard on these next 3 videos. And like, he's like, hey, just finish the script on this video. Or like, I'm going to edit this script a little bit more tonight, guys. Sorry about, you know, no video, but I promise it's going to be worth it. Like, the over communication, which like some people would call it, I would just call it communication, but like, talking about your process it has become so important to what you're doing as a content creator, because if you're not talking about your process, people just assume you're not doing anything,
right?
And that is the last thing that you want people to be thinking, is that you're just sitting around being a lazy YouTuber or a lazy streamer.
It's not a perfect parallel, but look back in the days of Destiny 1 when Bungie was clearly working hard on getting the next expansion out there, but they didn't talk about it. They didn't inform us of the process. And as a result, people complained.
Yeah.
Now they have learned and they have a roadmap in place. And it's very much the same thing with me on YouTube. I like to think, okay, what are some things that people can expect to see next? When can I communicate that progress is being made on them? And there are some like projects that take literally ages that I try and keep under wraps as much as I can, but at the same time, I will try and communicate whenever it's possible. For example, The Books of Sorrow is a series that I have been making for like 3 years now, and there are 3 episodes of that, and it has been like a year since I've communicated anything about part 4. Right? Because it's still ongoing, and these things take time. And, you know, you do like to give people that insight into the production process where you can, because it means your audience is involved, you know? Like, when I sit there and talk to somebody who is a subscriber, occasionally, and again, Twitch and YouTube subscribers, completely different thing, just in case people didn't realize somehow. But yeah, like, there is this insight that they have into the amount of work that goes into this. A small side note, by the way, something really fascinating for long form and edited content on YouTube generally. If you're looking to gauge how much work has gone into a video, if you are looking at something that is very heavily edited and is about 10 minutes, and I love this statistic when it came up, because I found that it was so completely and utterly on point. You are looking at the length of the video. So let's say it's a 10-minute video with lots of editing. Imagine something that Jez makes. Take that video and then assume that every minute is 1 to 2 hours worth of work. Because at
Absolutely.
the end of the day, that's totally what it is.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, if you are doing this on a regular basis and you're making sure that everything is perfect, if you go through a really rigorous production process and have like first and second edits and drafts and stuff like that on your videos as well as your scripts, it can easily turn into a 4-day process to make a video. I have somewhat optimized my workflow. So the next thing I've got coming out, for example, I hate to plug on stream and on podcasts like this, but it's a 40-minute video where I'm critiquing Warmind, because there's some great solutions to problems that arise in that I thought could be offered to the developers. But that 40-minute video took me 4 days, right? Like, that was 4 days worth of refining the script, ensuring that I was absolutely touching on what I wanted to do, getting gameplay footage, which is like 5% of my job. So yeah, it's not actually playing video games. Sadly.
Truth.
I hate to break everyone's dreams, but that's totally not what it is. And then, like, a vast majority of it, recording audio, being in an editing suite, and having all of these moments where I'm like, oh god, I need to go ahead and redo that, or oh, this cut isn't quite right, I'm going to go ahead and work on this one more time. So yeah, like, the process will be long and rigorous, but at the end of the day, I hope that quality ends up speaking for itself on everything I make. So yeah, like it is worth not appreciating how much this takes in terms of, like, I don't want it to be like, be thankful that we made these videos.
Yeah.
Understanding and having like an empathy as one content creator to another for how much work goes into each of those videos, right? So again, it's not saying be thankful. It's more saying, I want you to understand what the process looks like, right? Because at the end of the day, that's huge, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. It's like movies for me. Like, I've grown so much in appreciation of movies after the past, few years, because I started watching behind the scenes stuff, and like, there are just these like incredible shots and like moments from movies that I like love, and then you watch behind the scenes and you see how much work like went in from making it from the original to like, going through like all 20 edits they had on it, and you're like, holy shit. Like, this 30 seconds of the movie was like a full work week for a team of 25 people, and it really makes you appreciate that moment more. I think that, that conversation around like, this is the work that it takes is so important, because for people who are entering the space right now, who are just getting started, like, I think everyone is fucking flabbergasted the first time they sit down and try to do any form of content creation, with maybe the exception of like straight to the face Instagram, Snapchat videos, which like those are, obvious, and we can talk about, like mental prep and things like that. There's definitely a process there that goes on internally for people who create like that. But, the external process of creation, whether it's a Twitch stream, a YouTube video, any long form content, I mean, shit, even most podcasts, people, they're like, the number one piece of feedback I get from this podcast is, Broman, I tried streaming and holy fucking shit, I had no idea. Because when you're the director and the first assistant director and the audio engineer and the network engineer and the graphic designer and the audio tech and the script writer and the the community manager and all this stuff for your content, that is you have to wear all of those hats to be successful. And you have to do them well. So I think that talking about the process and how much time it takes to just put out one video is really key. So when you're getting started, and if you're listening to this, listen to that and understand that, Byf's process is really refined, right? Like, you've been doing this for 4 years, 5 years, consistently, and it's taking him that much time. If you are learning for every hour that he's working, you can probably expect 10 hours or more of education on the topics that you're going to be touching on, whether it's video editing, audio processing, networking, all of the ancillary stuff. I like to call it if you're a plumber, it's learning how to operate your truck, right? You're a plumber. You can't call your fucking boss and be like, my car stopped working, I don't know why. And he's like, well, did you put gasoline in it? And you're like, I don't know what gasoline is. You look like a jackass. So you're going to have to learn how to put gas in the engine and how to, change the oil and make sure the tires have the right amount of air in them, and all of this stuff that has absolutely nothing to do, air quotes, externally with your profession, but it is key to being able to deliver the content that you want. So, be willing to put in the time and effort and understand that, like, the first few times you do something, it's going to suck and it's going to be really hard, but you're going to get better at it over time. I loved that you talked about workflow, because that's something I get asked about a lot. What do you think, for someone getting started, what are some like best practices that you have for setting up workflow?
Okay. For setting up workflow, more specifically, gosh, that's
for YouTube. I'll do my workflow first.
Yeah, go for it.
So, like, for me, I break my day down into like 15-minute chunks, and I'll either complete a task inside of that 15 minutes or I'll get as much done as I possibly can. This works out really, really well when I'm like waking up, because it gives me 15 minutes for email, 15 minutes for Instagram DMs, 15 minutes for checking and tweeting, and then 15 minutes of prep time for turning on the stream. So like my first hour of the day is like, making sure everything's all right and putting gas in the tank for the day. And then like I'll stream for however long. And then after that, I will go through the same process to decompress. 15 minutes on every social. I usually add YouTube in by the end of the day, because that's usually something that goes out while I'm streaming, and I'll follow up and check on that and make sure it's good. And then I'll check on, my Facebook socials as well. And then once all that's done, I go through the process again 2 more times with King's Coast and Guardian Con. But that's kind of how I break my day up.
So the reason why I found that tricky initially is because the process of one video often goes over a few days.
Sure.
So it's a little bit trickier to kind of describe. I'd say that topping and tailing the day with regards to social and emails and communication is definitely correct. I think it's also important that in the mornings, or just generally when you've got a spare second, if it's lunch or something, do anything in between that you need to do. Like, I have an invoice I need to pay. Let's go ahead and do that right now, because otherwise I'm going to procrastinate around it and it's not going to get done.
Absolutely.
So obviously do all of that stuff. But I think most importantly, let's say that you're going to go ahead and do a really ambitious thing of a video every day, which is completely possible, but it will be brutal. I think that your workflow has to start, assuming that you're doing long form content, with a script. At bare minimum, a series of bullet points that you want to touch on, with sub bullet points talking about like the minutia and the finesse of the topics. In its longest, you could be doing what I do, which is I will open a Word document and I will write about something I love for, say, like 4 hours or so until I have a script that I think is good. So that's my morning in terms of after emails. That starts at around about 10 for me. So by the time that it's 3 p.m., I will roughly have a script. After all that's said and done, straight into it with recording said script. So I will open up what I used to record, which is a free program called Audacity. It is exceedingly easy to use.
Audacity's awesome.
Free download. Like, it's one of those things where you really don't always need like the most complicated software that you've paid like $1,000 for. Sometimes free stuff just does the job really nicely too.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're looking just for something to record, go ahead and get that. After all that's said and done, I'll spend about an hour working with that audio that I've recorded, because I will be adding little effects of mastering. So that's not anything of like changing my voice from exceedingly high to, the typical lows or anything.
Yeah.
But it's, you have things like background noise, you will have bad takes, and that actually ends up being quite a lot of time. You edit that out, you listen through it once or twice to make sure everything's good. You silence bits in between your words, even if you're really going into it. Like if I'm doing a bit more of an artistic lore video, then I definitely spend a lot more time on that. Pull that afterwards into your editing suite and edit. The edit itself can sometimes be another 4 hours or so. So if everything is going well for me, that means that I will have finished a video, and hopefully I can then get it exported and rendered in time, and that may mean that it's out by the end of the day. And again, that totally depends, because some videos are shorter than others. If I make a 10-minute video every day, I can just about make it. but it will take a very long time, which is why I often like to spend a day between videos, because otherwise things become unreasonable. I don't have that wind down time. I end up finishing at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do that anyway, so, you know, like, what difference does it make sometimes? But yeah, that ends up being sort of the process. If you're doing that day by day, I think it's best to go ahead and find a different setting too. Because, like, you'll probably back me up on this. When you've got a spare moment to step away from your setup, I assume that you take it whenever you have the opportunity, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so whenever I can, I get out of the house to do it, you know? I will go to a nearby park to write scripts. I will go to a coffee shop to write my scripts. If I can take a business call out of the house in a place that isn't, like, you know, crowded and with a screaming baby, if it's got decent audio quality, I will do that. So, you know, like, find times to step away from your setup whenever possible. I can't stress how important that is, because otherwise you go completely insane.
Yes.
And yeah, like, find little bits of stuff that you can do at the same time. You talked about in one of the previous podcasts what you can multitask with. So what are some things that you can do to work at the same time when you're working on 2 different things at once, and optimize your day as a result? Definitely do that. If I am walking back from a coffee shop, having just finished writing my script, I'm going to jump into Discord and talk with my mods, because they're going to be helping organize my Discord server on the back end of things. They are also some of the ones that help me with some of the support side of things. So Dan-John, who is my wonderful volunteer editor, who, much love, he is probably watching this right now, because I think he's also an addict to the Broman podcast. He is someone who I will communicate with regarding one of the series that I do, T-Slave. Sometimes I also need that time just to cool off. So sometimes I will sit there and for 15 minutes, if I need to, and if it's been a stressful day, I will just shoot the shit with the guys, you know? And yeah, like, do what you need to do. And in terms of workflow, see what happens. By the time it's all finished as well, I think part of the wind down process from each video is taking feedback. So I'm not just searching for that on Twitter, but I'm also very passively looking through my YouTube comments section. And I do not respond to everything. This is a crucial thing. Do not respond to everything, right? Because there are going to be some people in there that throw some salt at you. There are going to be some people in there that are obvious trolls. I will not name names, but I have seen YouTubers who respond to every single comment, whether it's good or bad. And responding to all the good ones, that's actually kind of cool. Like, I have a lot of appreciation if you respond to every good comment on your video and you're like, thanks, etc. But the minute you start responding en masse to trolls, you are shooting yourself in the foot with an automatic machine gun. It's do not do it. Do not disengage. Do not rise. So yeah, the reason you do that though is because there is a lot of valuable feedback that you can get from your audience.
Yeah.
It's important to understand what the difference between feedback and someone just trolling is, but regardless, my channel and my content has adapted and become better because of the feedback that I get from my audience. So yeah, absolutely take feedback and take that into your workflow, because that process is important, you know? It is how you become better. It is how you make content that will put you on the map. Yeah. So yeah, care about what your community has to say.
I think that's like taking appropriate feedback is just so huge. And then obviously like filtering that feedback through your lens of creativity. Like, you still need your voice to be your voice. You know, you can't let your community 100% decide. Like, you're not going to let them determine how you make your content, but listening to things like, I would love a video on this, like,
right.
Once you start, and this is a process that I keep meaning to make a video about. I always forget. But once you start making content, like every single piece of content I put out, especially around Ask Broman, feeds 4 or 5 different pieces of content within the next week. Right. You know, because you're tapping into the ethos of what people are going through at the moment. Like, one of the reasons why I started this podcast was because, you know, T-Rex and I had this really great 10 video series called Streaming 101, but that it didn't age well because there have been so many fundamental changes to this platform and YouTube that doing something on a day-to-day basis became so much more important, because as the landscape changes, the advice changes. So taking feedback, listening to feedback, and using it to inform and create more content to answer more questions is key. That's one of the big reasons why when I say just start, like, you have no idea the wealth of information and ideas that aren't in your head right now that will just show up through feedback, which I think is it's such an incredible and like underutilized feature by a lot of creators.
Absolutely.
But the creators that stick around long term and that do things like this forever, they get into that feedback loop with their community, and it's another way to keep putting fuel in your engine to make it happen. So Byf and I have been talking for a while, but it's great because, you know, he's a very thoughtful guy when it comes to making content on YouTube. I will definitely say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, okay, that's all I wanted to hear because I just wanted to hear Byf, I don't care about these questions. Byf's perspective on YouTube and growth and Nepenthes' perspective on YouTube and growth are both, they're different, but they're so incredibly important. So that if you are about to jump in, you know, they have a lot of similarities, but they have different forms of process. And so please take a minute to go listen to that podcast episode as well. Byf and Nepenthes are both YouTubers of like the highest caliber, with different approaches. And I think listening to those perspectives would be super key for you. Okay. Enough plugging. Let us get, some folks in here to ask some questions, and and then we'll see where it goes next. Let's get Mikey Mike. He's been in here for a minute. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Hey, nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you as well, sir. What can Byf and myself do for you?
Yeah, I was hoping to direct a question at Byf specifically.
Beautiful.
Of course. Absolutely. Ask away.
Alright, so I thought I'd kind of stay away from the lore since I could probably go on for days about that, but I just kind of wanted to talk to Byf about commissioning art for his videos. And it's just something that, as somebody who's considering starting a channel and just as a curious fan, I'm just kind of curious about the whole process, about like how you get money for the art and how you find artists you can trust and just how expensive it can be.
Okay, so that is a very good question, particularly if you're making videos that are sort of, I want to say more creative in nature, but that really kind of that underplays it, I think, because that covers all sorts of kinds of content, right? As for the issue of trust, which I think is probably one of the most important things, I want to go ahead and immediately say, every single time that you talk to someone, often it is a gamble. But it is a relatively safe gamble because the people in the community that you might find who are artists, or the people on the internet that you find who are artists, they often trade not just on their art, but also on their reputation. You do not work with somebody if you hear that they have a, mean streak going through them, or if it's like, okay, this person is always lazy, or this person doesn't do the work that I actually wanted them to do. They give me something different. Like, the word will eventually shift around and people will find out. So it is relatively safe to take the gamble often, because likelihood is if someone has made a really bad set of practices, you will know about it. As for the actual monetary side of things, so back in the day, when I made like the first ever Book of Sorrows, I commissioned 6 pieces of art, and like the entire project cost $600, and that came all out of my own pocket, right? And I made a loss on that video initially because of ad revenue back in the day not being as good, but also because of the fact that, I had dumped $600 into a video where I'd normally be able to make the entire thing for free, right? And this is entirely why I started the Patreon that I now have, and that is now primarily where I get that from. Now, it is not an enormous Patreon, it's not a particularly active one either, but it is so important because every month I have roughly 150 odd people who are helping me create these projects, and it doesn't take a month to make a project, right? Like, often the money does have to get stockpiled so that we can afford. Because, I mean, like, Iron Lords Part 1, for example, that's a project which I talked a little bit more about with Paul Tassi and Forbes. And I was very open about the money and the time that it took. That took something like 4 months to create when the production process properly started. But that also cost nearly $4,000 to make, right?
Wow.
So, like, it takes time to build up the pure cash reserve when it's all done. And it does make your tax side of things a lot trickier, especially if you're doing something on the end where it's also like, hey, this is something where it's like to pay artists, but also even though it's like held in a separate bank account, that's still income that I'm earning. So you need to be ready to deal with the very complicated side of your tax return if you're dealing with that. As a general rule as well, I will say this, pay your artists, pay them, right? And it's going to suck because making great videos with great art is, oh my God, it can be an expensive and daunting process to begin with. But at the same time, for every single artist that does it for free, who, by the way, if you are doing that completely of your own volition, you're an absolute saint. But for every artist who is doing that and knows they can do that, there is also an artist who is starving, in some cases metaphorically, in some cases literally. Mm-hmm. So respect the fact that you are making money off of their work, and then, you know, if everything goes well, you will break even. If not, you will come back with some additional revenue. You will have a profit, right? And at the end of the day, I hate to talk about it in such cold business terms, but that's what you end up having to think about, because that is entirely what the process of the video has become. Having said that, do not allow profit to become some kind of thing of the overriding principle that just takes over your values, right? Plug your artist in the video. Make sure that people go ahead and follow them. Check them out. Give them the resources they need to work. Another little great side example of this. There is a guy out there in the community called Mech33 or FMechie, and he does some hilarious photoshops, but also some fantastic graphics and artwork. And I worked with him before. I trust him very deeply. I ended up buying him an upgraded laptop in return for projects, which I still have not redeemed, by the way. And that is purely a thing of trust, and also a thing of saying, like, that is an investment towards their future education and their skills. So if you are in that very fortunate position, do not be afraid to make the investment with someone that you trust, because, yeah, that will pay dividends in the long run if you're looking to have art involved in your video creations. It's a bit of a long-winded answer. I hope I...
No, you covered a lot of important stuff.
Yeah, that was great.
I just wanted to state, again, because you brought up making sure you pay your artists. Make sure you pay your fucking artists. Like...
Yes.
Pay your goddamn artists. It is... You know, it's really interesting you brought up a point about buying a laptop, right? So the guy that does all my overlay design, Captain Twaz, he, you know, started making a lot of graphic stuff for myself and some other people in the Destiny community. And, you know, after he had done a crazy amount of work for me and just refused payment for a while, I went into his channel while he was streaming an overlay design one day, and he had the donation total for like buying an upgrade for his PC. So I gave him the rest of the money that he needed, because to me, that was an investment in not just like my future, but someone else's future, right? Like, you know, investing in that, I was like, I don't know what this is going to do for him. I know for me, it's the least I can do for all the work that you know, Twaz has done. But in the long term, you know, it enabled him to start working full time, you know, in a greater capacity. And that sort of stuff, you know, that long term investment in other people is just so key. And it goes both ways. There's people that want to just try and take everything they can from an artist, and then once they've used that artist up, they'll go grab someone new, which is a big fear for a lot of artists, which is why for me, I always try and pay more than the usual requested rate, because you never know when the next time they're going to get a project is. So pay your artists.
Yeah.
All right. Do you mind if I just go ahead and say, well, I don't know why I'm asking if
you're allowed to follow up or whatever, man.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask one more thing for Byf. It's relating to the topic. How much did you invest into the Rise of Iron video before you started getting a little scared about the payoff? Because did you say 4,000 for the Rise of Iron series?
Yes, so that's roughly, again, that's series is maybe a little bit misleading in that context. I just want to be absolutely clear with it. It is one video that I was invested into. The next one is coming up very soon, though, right? And that has even more invested into it, because the guy I'm working with, Chris Tulloch, he's improved a lot of his stuff. Again, investment pays off in the end of the day, right? I was not necessarily scared about it, though, because I knew that with a video like that, it would grab the community's attention at the time being. I knew that it was worth doing because the quality of what I was getting out of it was going to be worth the payoff. More importantly than all of that, though, I need to go ahead and say this very firmly. If you are able to pay an artist like that, know that even if it doesn't necessarily pay off, And if it's one of those things of like, man, I made a huge loss out of this, and now I'm like $3,000 down the drain, assuming that you haven't spent that money when you realistically didn't have it in the first place, like, I don't know, if you needed to spend that on food and you are banking on this, obviously don't do that.
Please don't.
But please don't. Please have food. Please eat. But if you were doing that, I think there is a much more valuable thing than any of that you've gotten out of this, which is potentially the lessons of why it didn't succeed, right? So that is worth your investment in that, because at the end of the day, when you go and do your next big project, you may sit there and you may have a moment where you're like, okay, this is what didn't work about it previously. And maybe you try something that's a little bit safer, or maybe you try something that you think is going to work well. You listen to the feedback that people gave you. You looked at what you think didn't work in the video, what you didn't like, and maybe next time it's worth the payoff. Yeah, it's a very scary moment, but nowadays when it comes to big lore projects like that, and if ever I'm spending like a certain amount of money to make a video, I don't feel anywhere near as anxious as I did at the very beginning of my career with this stuff, because at the end of the day, there's two things I'm always thinking about. It's firstly, always a lesson that I can learn, and secondly, it is something that, at least for artistic content, can still grow over time, right? This is maybe a bit of a unique one to me, or maybe to channels that do long-form content generally, but if you are putting a lot of effort into your creation, a lot of that stuff tends to slow burn. So, lots of YouTube videos die after 48 hours. Like, they will just not grow in views. Lore content and long-form content, they have something very, very much in common, which is that they are evergreen videos. In other words, they'll get their initial bump of 50,000 views, and then every day, because people are constantly searching those topics, they will slowly grow. So, a video that I made that got 30,000 views at launch was 1 year ago about Titans and Titan orders in Destiny, And now that video has something like 300,000 views, I think, because it's grown over several years, right? So do not be afraid. There's a lot that can go wrong, but if it does go wrong, you can learn from it. And at the same time, there's a lot that can go right. But again, make sure that you're making an investment that you can afford to make.
All right. Thanks. That offered a lot of great insight. That's exactly what I was looking for. Before I go, just wanted to let you know, Book of Sorrows series was by far one of my favorite things that I've seen on YouTube, like, to date.
Thank you. Dude, seriously, that means a hell of a lot. Like, thank you so much.
I mean, the artwork in that video alone is what inspired me to ask this question. I just thought the way that was put together and the content was great. So, thank you very much for entertaining me, I guess.
I love it, man. Oh, we lost Byf. Hang on, I'll get Byf back in here. He's like, what happened? I gotta get Byf. There you go, Byf.
All right, I don't know if you caught the last bit because you left, but I just
moved to AFK. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I was just saying that it was by far one of my favorite videos, and it's what inspired me to ask this question. So thank you very much for humoring me and giving such a great detailed explanation of what I asked.
Dude, my pleasure.
All right, man. Thank you, Mikey.
Yep.
Have a good one. All right, we're gonna get someone else in here. That was a really good question. I don't know if I've had an opportunity to talk about paying your fucking artists on this podcast before. So, like, I am eternally grateful to Mikey for asking that question. So now I'm on record bitching you out if you don't pay your art. If I find out you don't pay your artists and you're a content creator, I will come for your throat. It is not all right. Valiant Volt is going to be the next guy we're going to grab in here. What's up, Valiant Volt?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being here. What can we do for you?
Yeah, man.
So my biggest question is, like, how do you get people to just click on your stream? Like, I'll be sitting in a directory and I'll have friends or, my wife or whatever to help me get the more viewers, but I'll go a whole 3 hours and not a single person, like, stops by ever. And, I'm trying to do the network thing, going to other people's streams, not promoting myself, but, like, just getting my name out there. And then when I'm streaming, it's just like Ghostland.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of variables in this. Two things that I think a lot of people miss when they're getting started is one, especially in the current environment of live streaming and on Twitch in particular, if you have not been active in other communities, meaning you're in other channels 3 to 4 hours a day, 10 or 15 different channels, actively engaging with the communities inside of those channels, that is more important right now than streaming. Because you have to build a foundation, you have to build a reputation as somebody that people care about, and then they'll come watch you stream. That's a behavior that I've noticed a lot of broadcasters, top broadcasters like myself, or starting broadcasters, that has been kind of a staple of people's experience on Twitch for a long time. So do that if you're not doing that. And then 2, there's a lot to be said about game selection. So like if you're streaming the hottest new game on the planet, you're going to get buried. You'll get buried every time. It's a horrible business choice. You'll never grow doing that. You need to find games that are important time-wise, like as in like this moment in time, that aren't the games that everybody, in the top 1,000 broadcasters on Twitch or anywhere are playing. So, for example, recently Chrono Trigger had a release on Steam, and while the Steam release wasn't really well received, that would have been a great time to play that retro game because people would be interested in watching it. So you'd get attention on your channel because you'd be hooking into the marketing dynamic of that game and the social conversation around it. Moments like this happen all the time. You can see there are some great broadcasters that utilize this sort of behavior on the front and back end. So on the front end, you can look at someone like Carnage, who does like a full series playthrough before there is a big launch of a title. Like he did a full series playthrough of God of War before the new God of War launched. Or you can look at someone who operates on the back end of that, like Excessive Profanity, who usually waits a week or two to play a new release. So everyone who's already experienced the game has experienced it, and they will come into his channel to talk about it. So like those are some things to consider. As far as getting attention on your channel. Also, the patented, have you looked at streaming on Facebook or Mixer? Because that's a better place to start if you're new. Advice. Like that. So many people are romantic about Twitch and making it on Twitch. And, we're getting into the 10s and 20s of people who've listened to this podcast 6 months ago, decided to take a risk and go over to Mixer, and now they're partnered Mixer streamers with more followers and subscribers than they had on Twitch. Or you'll have stories like Pool Shark, who came over, went from Twitch to Facebook, and he averaged 10 to 50 viewers here, and now he's averaging 1,000 to 2,000 viewers on Facebook.
Yeah, I actually had I think it was a while ago that I sent you a couple of DMs about, staying on Twitch or going to Mixer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you told me, follow your passion. If your passion's Twitch, stay with Twitch, or, growth, go elsewhere. And so I did. I went to Mixer, and I saw a little bit of success in the first couple of weeks. And then, life happened and I couldn't be on at all. And so now that I've made a comeback and I can stream pretty much every day now, it just
patience.
Yeah.
Patience and everything that I said. If it was working before and you had to take a break because of life, it'll work again. You just have to be patient and you have to put in the work.
I can't really add much to the conversation regarding streaming because I've given it my try and I've found that it doesn't necessarily work for me personally.
That is also very important advice.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Literally, like you're the first person who's come on here and said this. Can you talk about what it was about streaming that you were like, this isn't for me? Like, what were the flags in your mind that helped you come to that conclusion?
It was making my other content worse. It was stressing me out because it was something that was constantly alive. I love the idea that I'm edited and I get the ability to sort of control all of my responses and be as articulate as I can whenever I'm trying to communicate something in a video. But Twitch was something that just did not speak to me as a result. Like, I was sitting there for 5 hours stressing under like backlights or whatever, and I thought to myself, this isn't what gels with me. More importantly as well, it's worth noting, I am very, very much introverted, and that doesn't mean that you can't stream on Twitch or
yeah, exactly,
Facebook kind of thing if you are an introvert. But it is something that, for me at least, played into the factor. And I said to myself, like, I do not gain energy from constantly having to respond to the Twitch chat, which I was very bad at doing as well. Like, I just realized it's not a skill set that I have, and it is a skill, you know, like. Keeping an eye on the Twitch chat all the time and keeping constantly engaged and then also playing a freaking video game at the same time, that's hard. That's really, really hard. So, you know, I sat there and I was like, I know where my skill set is. And, you know, I didn't want to go ahead and stress things out anymore. It was making my YouTube content worse. So it was a very, very clear decision. But to go ahead back to you, Valiant, well, I want to go ahead and just say this. As somebody who 3 years into their YouTube career dipped from a couple hundred views a video to barely 20, as I was having to stop for exams and whatnot, and I basically had to completely restart my YouTube career a few years in. It can absolutely be done. I think that what Ben says regarding persistence is also something to keep in mind. Like, even if you get knocked down and even if you have to take a break, go ahead and don't be afraid of restarting. Don't be afraid to build back up again. Because the only thing you're gaining in that instance is experience, right? Like, you've been down that particular road before, and it's going to be easier this time. That's what I'd say as a general rule, right? Don't be afraid of building back up again.
All right.
You got any follow-ups, man?
No, I mean, that pretty much hits the nail on the head.
Awesome, man. Well, best of luck. Keep at it. And before you go, you want to let everybody know where they can find you on Mixer?
Yeah, it's Valiant Volt, just as my my Twitch name, or well, whatever my name is in Discord.
Yeah, mixer.com/Valiant Volt.
Yep, and that's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram.
It's everywhere? Fantastic, man. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome day. And, you know, if you aren't following Valiant Volt on Mixer, maybe you should go check them out. Just saying. Maybe you should. All right. Have a good one, man.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much, Volt.
That's good, man. Restarting is always hard.
Yeah.
I get that question a lot. Like, I streamed for, I streamed for like 4 months straight and everything was great. Now no one's back. And it's like, it's such a fucking hard situation to be in. But you'll always, I mean, like, this is something that I encounter a lot. Like, I stream every fucking day on Twitch. And there are people that just that think I cease to exist when Destiny content is not relevant. So, Destiny content will come back and someone will be like, holy shit, Broman, I didn't know you still streamed. And I'm like,
you're alive?
It's been 3 years since you've been here. And like you did, like, so it's crazy. Like, as much as you think that, no matter the size of your channel, there are people that will forget about you. No, sorry, I just needed to type that into chat because none of my mods were helping me. Mods! Okay, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. But yeah, you're always going to have people forget about who you are and your content, which is why you just have to like put out as much as you can, be patient, and realize that that's going to come back around. And then when you have that interaction, when you have the moment where somebody returns to your channel, use that as a bridge and like talk about all the stuff you've been doing. Like, now, shit, if someone's like, I haven't been around in 2 years, what have you missed? And I'm like, well, I got married. We have a multi-million-dollar charity convention that we run each year that's got like 15,000 people that are going to come this year. We've got a coffee company. I'm back on YouTube. I have an Instagram. I have a Facebook page. Like, it's just an opportunity to start talking about absolutely everything that you have going on in your life. And that's the other thing about live, is that you hear yourself talk about all these things. You hear yourself talk about all these things constantly, but the average churn on Twitch is you have an almost entirely new set of viewers about every 20 minutes. 60% of your viewer base will churn through on about a 20-minute basis.
I mean, yeah, if you needed evidence of that, why do people keep on asking repeated questions whenever something comes up? Like, I'm struggling to think of an example, but you know exactly
what gun is that?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
In Destiny, what's your gear loadout? Like, you can literally have just concluded your whole "this is my loadout" spiel for a gun, and you'll be like, "All right," and everyone in chat will go, "Yo, thank you." 2 seconds later, someone comes in and says, "What's their loadout?"
Mm-hmm.
It is such a it's just something that you have to get used to. You have to constantly get used to reintroducing yourself, and part of that is answering questions over and over again. But part of that is making sure that you take every opportunity that you have to sort of pitch yourself, because you're constantly starting new with people on Twitch. And it's an important perspective to keep. All right, let's grab we'll grab this guy. This is Swolbraham Lincoln.
Oh my god, that name is
what
fantastic.
A great name, right? Hey, what's up, Swolbraham Lincoln? How you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going, Ben?
It's going really good. This is the first time I've seen you in here, so yeah, what can we do for you?
Just two questions.
Sure.
For you and for Byf. What is your guys' favorite part of content creation?
Oh, that's a good fucking question.
Oh yes.
For me, my favorite part of making content is like, I'm just obsessed with how easy it is to distribute. Like, when I was, in dead end jobs that were going nowhere and no one gave a fuck about who I was or my entire life, I like dreamed of a day where somebody might care. And like, the fact that every single day I can reach out across all my social platforms to like over 1 million people and try to make them smile is my favorite part of content creation. It's the just the potential size of your message's impact is completely unlimited due to the decentralized nature of content distribution. It's amazing. So for me, it's the ability to take a positive message and put it everywhere.
Oof. I think on my end, harkens back to what I originally said as kind of like my driving force behind why I make videos. I like telling great stories. And for me, whenever I'm in the editing suite is sometimes where I get those moments of pure bliss. Because there are some moments where, even as someone who creates content on the daily, and a video being made is not the most incredible thing, there are moments where I will sit back and rewatch a cut that I've made and think to myself, there is something wonderful here, and I have made something that I think is going to be compelling for people to listen to and for people to watch. And it's kind of an unspoken magic that I think people get whenever they're doing a load of different kinds of art, right? Like, there's an artistic buzz that I absolutely assume that you get during acting or painting or during the process of writing a fantastic piece of fiction. And it's with that creative urge that I always find myself being perpetually reinvigorated. Words. I can't speak today.
You're good.
Perpetually being reinvigorated. Because again, like, that is what really drives me. It is always about, what can I do to tell the best story that I can possibly tell? And when I realize that I've found something phenomenal and that I've told a story that is worth sticking around for, that's the moment for me when I realize, yeah, this is going to be a great video, Like, it's a little example. When it came to the 90-minute freaking super cut thing that took like 10 freaking weeks to make, the moment when I knew I was going to be proud of this video, no matter how it turned out, was a moment during a cut where I'm talking about Yalahorn. And there was a certain way that everything, like, obviously you go ahead and you make it so that, the audio is well tailored and that it makes sense, right? But there was a certain point at which music and voice lined up perfectly. And I closed my eyes and listened back to what I had said, and I thought to myself, people are going to find that moment where I talk about Project Heimdall to be an amazing moment because it just gelled, right? And so it's creating moments like that is my favorite part of content creation. Just unspoken magic. I can't describe. I really can't.
I dig it. I like that. You got any follow-ups, Mr. Swolbraham Lincoln?
I do.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, just the second question. For definitely both of you guys. I know that you guys both are essentially pros at this. Because I mean, you guys are both very successful. Tips on time management.
Sure. We touched on this a little bit before. Do you have like a specific area of time management that you would want us to focus on, or just sort of general broad strokes?
What did you not speak on before? I missed, I guess. How about that?
Okay, that's cool. I can start. So yeah, like before we mentioned like how we both process our days. I think like the 201 level to that is structuring your day for maximum impact as a content creator is really key. So like as much as I say and try to do everything everywhere every day, one of the things that I am teaching myself and I feel like I've gotten better at over the past 3 months is figuring out where my time investment is going to be the most valuable each day. Like, during new releases, during Destiny 2 launch, it was much more important for me to be streaming every day than posting, as many Instagram stories as I could. But while I was out of town for this last business meeting for King's Coast, that was a perfect opportunity for me to storytell the process of this business meeting, flying there, all the stuff we're doing with Kevin, where we were at, documenting the area, things like that, because that's outside of my environment and that plays really well on Instagram. So I think that the 201 level of time management is learning enough about how your content's consumed to realize like, okay, on this day, I need to focus on Instagram. This day I need to focus on YouTube. For an example of focusing on YouTube, the day Sea of Thieves launched, I knew that the second we encountered the Kraken, that video needed to be up as soon as possible because there's a chance we would be one of the first people in the world to encounter it. That happened. And this random video that I just had Tullis edit and throw up as quick as possible ended up getting like 310,000 views in like the first month of that game being out. So there, like, that was a more important moment for me to capture on YouTube than stream, because on stream, obviously that's going to happen a whole bunch of times, but making sure I took the time right after that fight when everyone else was screaming and being excited to make sure that I had the presence of mind to like text my editor and say, this goes up as soon as possible, let me know when it's done, was really important. So that's my side of things.
Yeah, I think on to take a little bit of an opposite thing, it's going to sound like this is a really bad tip at first, but know where your limits are and know when to take a break, and don't be afraid of that.
That was great.
So it sounds like a terrible thing in terms of time management, because it's like, hey, I thought this was supposed to be so I could do more work. But if I learned one thing from my time in doing YouTube and university and getting 4 hours of sleep a night on a good night, it was simply this. It's that I pushed myself so hard that I was getting less done instead of more, right? And that it covers every single front. Right. So, like, obviously, taking a nap during work hours is a no-no. Don't do that. But when it comes to the process of creating content, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Twitch or whether it's some other medium like Instagram, go ahead and always acknowledge how much work you need to put in for a certain project and understand how you can break that down effectively and understand where your burnout points are, right? So if I am going to do that process of making a 10-minute video and that's going to take me the whole day to do it properly, I understand that I'm going to need at least 2 breaks and a lunch, right? So I will have my thing where I will blitz through the script as much as I can, and then I will get my first draft out there, and then I will break for lunch, and then I will come back and I will perfect it over the next 2 hours or 1 hour, depending on how big or long it ends up being. And then after all that's said and done, I will record my audio. Recording audio for me is the worst bit. So after I'm done listening back to my voice, which I actually despise doing, I will then take another break. Yeah, that bit surprises people. And yeah, when everything is also said and done and it's in render, you have a lot of dead air and dead time anyway, so then I will take a moment and step back again, right? And it's also a thing of, in those breaks, understanding what you can do without being like overly stressed. So if you can take those breaks and step back, but then also use that time for something like, say, Instagram, or to post on Twitter, or to reply to a business email, do that. If you need it purely so you can wind down, don't be afraid to do that either. It is very much also about understanding the needs of you as a person, both your body and your mind. Be in tune with that and know what you need.
I think that's so key, is like identifying areas where you can have brief downtime and trying to maximize it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful.
Thanks, man. Well, do you have anything else? Do you have anything you want to plug? Any projects you're working on?
No, sir, I don't. I just
Wow.
wanted to pop in and
Wow,
ask these 2 questions, and thank you for having me.
Those were... Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being selfless, dude. Holy
Yeah,
Lord.
that was really great, dude. I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Abraham Lincoln. You're the best.
Have a good one.
The guy's name is just so good.
I cannot get over it, man. What the
So
hell?
good. First time I ever saw him in my chat room, I was like, motherfucker, this guy is smart. Okay, so we've got that. I'm gonna try and get one follow-up person in here, because I always like trying to grab someone who's been on in like the first 10 episodes, and then we'll talk again. So this is Of Ninja Actions.
Hi, Byf.
Hey, Of Ninja. I have heard you talking a few times on the podcast before, so I saw your name and I was delighted. Oh my god, dude.
Oh, hello. Hi. He's exploding right now.
Ah.
There you go.
There we go.
Are we there? We got you?
The podcast, he knows about me.
He does. He knows about you. Oh, are you busy jumping around? Okay, I dig it. I dig it.
Yeah.
What can we do for you, man?
Broman, permission to jack your stream for like 1 minute.
Yeah, jack my stream. That's fine.
All right. To go off that thing, I wrote it down. Do not create friction for your people. That means put your content out on everything you physically can do it on, because there are people that only are on one platform. So let's say they only watch Twitch, and if you put it out on YouTube, they won't see it. So if you do it on both, you'll reach those separate people.
Yeah.
So put it out on everything, even it's like to the point of being obnoxious. Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then so for it doesn't surprise me that you hate listening to your voice. Like there's scientific reasons for that. But I will let you know that you are the only one. For the rest of us, it's a quite enjoyable experience.
For some amount of hate that I give my own voice, it's nice to hear that, dude.
That's facts. If it would take us a great deal of searching to be like to find the other guy that's like, yeah, I just hate Byf's voice. That guy, we would find him, and then you would not hear about him because he'd be gone.
Oh, wow.
Oh dear.
Oh, damn.
Oh dear.
Be careful, other guy.
Yeah, you better watch out, dude. People are coming for you.
Byf's, you don't take Byf's job. So I did write a question. So what is what do you think the fastest way to start finding like your voice is after, like, aside from making content? Like you're putting out videos, you're streaming on Twitch, whichever one you do. What's like the fastest way to be like, this is the message that I want to put out now?
I don't think that thinking of it as what's the fastest way is actually the right way to think about it, right?
I would agree.
Because here's the thing, right? Like, for some people, it's going to be immediate and it's going to be clear, and for other people, it's going to take time. So, the first inkling of any idea where I started to get some kind of direction was back in 2013. I had just finished the exams I talked about earlier in the podcast, and I went to RTX in Austin, and I felt like I belonged in a gaming community. And that was the first point at which I was like, yeah, you know, like, I want to do something to do with gaming, and maybe that is continuing with my channel. And, you know, that did not give me a direction, but I needed to explore that way to get the confidence to say, yes, these are my nerds, I belong around them, you know? This group of people, right? And as for, like, finding the direction of being a storyteller, that revealed itself to me over the process of, like, 5 years, you know? I don't think there is ever a point to rushing it either, because it is all a journey that's a very personal one, and you very much want to allow yourself to learn as much as you need about yourself to discover what you want to do, you know? Like, start with something that's gut instinct and build out from there, perhaps, and just see where that takes you. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to explore new things. And yeah, just see where the world takes you.
I agree with all of that. 100%. If you're trying to find the place to look to get there the fastest, I think that you need to look at the end of your life, like however you envisioned that part of your life to be, because this is what I did. And you need to ask yourself, what do I want people to say about me when I'm done? Like, what do I want people to say about me, at my funeral? And that's really revealing. Like, that will tell you, like what actually matters. Like, this is what's going to be said when you don't have a voice to talk anymore. And so, for me, it was, I want people to say about me, I want them to say, like, Ben did everything that he could to make the world a better place. And I know that because XYZ, like, there are these things that he did to try and make my life better. And so working backwards from that point will give you some strong, like, scaffolding. It'll give you the list of things to try, like Byf said. So it works in synergy with his advice. You have a list of 5 things that you want people to say. How do I get this to happen? And then you work backwards to where you're at right now, and then you walk that path. For me, the overarching thing that I want done by the end of my life is I want to make the world, an infinitely better place, because I was in it, and because that is so, like, true to who I am. Like, it's the purest distillation of all of my beliefs. I can always, hit that if I need energy. I can like feel drained, I feel lost, I feel confused. I can say, okay, all this bullshit's going on. How do I make all of it better to make the world a better place? And that, when you find that core of who you are, it makes authenticity and all of these other things you have questions just sort of all line up. So that's what I would do. And then after you've got your list, everything Byf said.
All right. Cool.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I'm just fucking around. Do you have anything else? Like any follow-up questions to that?
Not today. That covers it, I think.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Well, Ninja Actions, thank you very much. Do you want to plug your stuff again?
_ninja_actions on Twitch. That's the only place I have that at right now. So, Twitch.
Awesome, dude. Well, you have an awesome day, and we'll talk again later, I'm sure.
See ya, Broman. See ya, Byf.
All right. See ya.
Old Ninja, dude. I'm so glad I got to have a conversation with one of the regular returners to the podcast. That's awesome,
it's cool. I like that we have the capacity to revisit people at different points on their journey. It's really incredible. But for now, we're gonna wrap it up. I think we'll have Byf back and do a longer Q&A segment with him in the future for those of you that are sad about it, like myself. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Byf, is there any parting thoughts, parting words you want to leave people with? Any motivation or things like that you want to leave folks with on the podcast?
I think I'll say this. When I started actually making YouTube videos and I put my first few out there, I didn't dare to dream that one day I would do this as my job, and I didn't dare to dream that one day someone would identify themselves as one of my fans. To this day, that is still spectacularly incredible that happens. I do not think I will ever get over that fact, but it is not something that I ever wished to dream about because I did not want to fail. I think what I want to go ahead and say to everyone here is, whilst that attitude definitely does keep you safe, I think that the most important thing you can do about your dreams is not just be realistic about them, but push through and see what you could do from where you stand, be ambitious and be hungry. Because I allowed things to come to me as everything sort of went along. I went with the flow and I grabbed opportunities as I saw them. And at the end of the day, it was almost like I was doing all of this with a blindfold on for the first few years, right? Like, again, I did not do any of this with the intention of having it be my full-time career, you know? Like, obviously, would have loved to. But I think it comes back to the purest thing of, what is your dream? Can you follow it? And regardless of whether that, you know, takes you to a point where you're as big as someone like Ninja, or whether you end up with, like, maybe a couple of people watching you every other day on Mixer, as long as you are fulfilling the core principle of that dream, I think that's what needs to make you happy. And I think if you can be satisfied doing that, then that is the true meaning of being a content creator, regardless of whether you are professional by definition and making money, or whether you want to just do it because it's, you know, a community that you love. I think that should always be kind of like your core. Follow the dream, and do not be afraid to let it take you to crazy places if it does take you to crazy places.
I could not agree more at all. Everybody, thank you so much for listening today. Our guest is MyNameIsByf. You can find him everywhere on the internet. If you just search MyNameIsByf, his primary platform is YouTube. That's where he makes a lot of his content, but he provides insight absolutely everywhere. As you can tell, Byf is a very contemplative and focused kind of guy. And I do not think I would steer you wrong for 1 second by saying that there isn't a piece of content he's put out that won't make you at least smile and think about your life a little bit more. So, Byf, thank you so much for joining us. That has been episode 69 of Ask Broman. Thank you so much. As I do at the end of every podcast, I want to say thank you so much for listening. And the only thing I give a shit about when it comes to this podcast is if you liked it, subscribe. If you don't feel like doing that, please just tell one person, that you thought about while you were listening to this, and you're like, so-and-so needed to hear that one part. And please share it with them. The whole goal of this podcast is to make the world a better place and to help you all find the motivation to do the things that you want to do in your life. So if you could spread the love, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you all next time. Peace. Excellent podcast.